15 black R&B female singers who were the worst sex addicts. They had the voices, the beauty, the fame, and the spotlight. But behind the glamour were women judged far more harshly than the men beside them. Some were called dangerous, some were called shameless, and some were pushed to the edge simply for wanting too much. But what if the real scandal was never their desire? Only the world's fear of it. Stay with me, because these stories are not just shocking. They reveal how black women in music were punished for living too honestly, loving too deeply, and refusing to hide who they were. Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston looked like perfection, and that was part of the tragedy. The face was serene, the smile was polished, the voice came out like light through stained glass. To the public, she was the ideal woman, graceful, gifted, controlled, almost sacred. But underneath that immaculate image was a person with cravings she could never fully drag into the open. Born on August 9, 1963, in Newark, New Jersey, Whitney rose with a sound so flawless that people began mistaking discipline for purity. They forgot that a woman can sing like an angel and still ache like anyone else. What made Whitney so magnetic was the friction between what she was allowed to be and what she actually was. She was sold as untouchable, yet everything in her greatest performances suggested someone who felt too much. Her love songs did not sound theoretical. They sounded inhabited. There was heat under the restraint, private longing under the elegance, and a quiet emotional desperation inside even her most controlled phrasing. That is why the stories around her private attachments became so powerful. Whether with women, men, or complicated bonds, the public was never fully allowed to understand Whitney, always gave the impression of someone reaching for a form of closeness that fame kept distorting. Do you think Whitney suffered more from addiction or from having to hide the full truth of her heart? That is what keeps her story burning. She was not empty glamour. She was compressed feeling. The world wanted her spotless, but the voice kept revealing the fracture lines. Whitney Houston still hurts to think about because she did not merely perform love. She sounded like a woman trapped between image and instinct, still trying to breathe beautifully while the walls closed in. Tina Turner. Tina Turner did not enter a room. She struck it. Born on November 26, 1939 in Nutbush, Tennessee, she built a stage identity out of velocity, sweat, danger, and refusal. Her voice tore through songs instead of gliding over them. Her body moved like it had its own weather system. Her presence did not ask for approval, it overwhelmed. That kind of force changes the way people read a woman. Tina was not framed as merely attractive, she was framed as consuming. And once a woman is seen as that powerful desire around her, stops being treated as romance and starts being treated as threat. What made Tina so difficult for people to simplify was that her sensuality never looked ornamental. It looked elemental. She did not perform seduction as a pose. She projected appetite as something tied to survival energy and complete aliveness. That is why men in stories about her often appear less like conquerors than like people who stepped too close to fire. Tina carried the charge of a woman who would not settle for lukewarm feeling, half-hearted passion, or controlled femininity. In a culture happy to praise male heat, she became controversial for bringing the same intensity in a female body. Do you think Tina Turner's power fascinated people because it felt sexual, or because it felt impossible to control? She remains unforgettable because her magnetism was welded to truth. She had already lived through violence, humiliation, abandonment, and reinvention. By the time the world saw her at full strength, she was not selling fantasy. She was transmitting hard-earned force. Tina Turner endures because she made desire look like stamina, eroticism look like danger, and female freedom look far too large for the world that first tried to contain her. Aretha Franklin. Aretha Franklin stood so tall in culture that people often forgot she was made of flesh. Born on March 25, 1942 in Memphis, Tennessee, and formed in Detroit, she became the Queen of Soul, not simply because she sang well, but because she sounded like command itself. Her voice carried church sorrow, authority, tenderness, and righteous demand in one breath. She could make a line feel like a sermon and a seduction at the same time. That dual power is central to her image. Aretha was not either sacred or sensual. She was both, and that made her harder for the world to reduce. Her life had adult weight from very early on. She became a mother while still very young, and the emotional maturity in her singing always suggested someone who had encountered love not as fantasy, but as consequence. The piece around her does not work because it tries to make her scandalous. It works because it reveals how much instinct can exist beneath dignity. Aretha's beauty was never girlish. It was sovereign. Her desire, when people hinted at it, did not seem reckless. It seemed serious, embodied, and entirely her own. That is precisely what unsettles people, a woman who looks regal and still wants deeply. Do you think Aretha Franklin's majesty made people ignore how earthy and passionate she really was? What gives Aretha such enduring complexity is that she refused to flatten herself into a symbol fit for easy worship. She sang from body as much as spirit. She knew loneliness, devotion, resentment, and hunger. That is why her best recordings feel alive decades later. They are not museum pieces. They breathe. Aretha remains monumental because she proved a woman could be revered and still remain fully human. Donna Summer. Donna Summer made this body audible. Born on December 31, 1948 in Boston, Massachusetts, she did not just become the queen of disco by singing over dance beats. She changed what female pleasure was allowed to sound like in mass culture. Love to love. You Baby was not controversial simply because it was sexy. It was controversial because it centered a woman's breathing rhythm and physical surrender as music itself. That pushed beyond flirtation. Donna was not implying desire. She was turning it into architecture. That made her larger than a trend. She arrived with glamour, but the real shock came from candor. Her performances suggested that sensuality was not something shameful, hidden, or available only through the male imagination. She gave it voice from inside the female body. That difference is huge. Popular culture can tolerate women being looked at. It often panics when women start naming what they feel. Donna crossed that line cleanly. She did it with sophistication, control, and melody, but she still crossed it. That is why the reaction around her was so heated. Do you think Donna Summer disturbed people because she made female pleasure too impossible to deny? What keeps Donna from ever being reduced to mere provocation is craft. She had range phrasing, taste timing, and the rare ability to make sensuality sound luxurious instead of cheap. Her records did not endure because they were scandalous. They endured because they were musically alive. Donna Summer remains one of the most important women in this conversation because she made the mainstream hear something. It had always tried to contain a woman enjoying herself without apology. Chaka Khan. Chaka Khan did not radiate softness. She radiated voltage. Born on March 23, 1953 in Chicago, Illinois, she first stormed through music with Rufus and then became a solo force whose voice sounded muscular, warm, sensual, and ungovernable. Chaka never seemed built for neat packaging. Even when perfectly styled, she carried the sense that something primal was still moving underneath. That is what made her so compelling. She did not seem decorated by glamour. She seemed to generate her own climate. Her place in a title like this comes from how openly life energy moved through her work. Chaka did not present desire as a side note. She made it sound connected to singing itself. Her tone often felt as if body rhythm memory and longing were arriving at the microphone together. That unsettles people because it breaks the fantasy that great female singers must be emotionally rich but physically restrained. Chaka offered no such comfort. She sounded like a woman whose instinct was part of her genius, not something that existed in spite of it. Do you think Chaka Khan's sensuality felt dangerous because it sounded inseparable from her talent? She remains unforgettable because nothing about her ever felt borrowed. The heat was hers. The nerve was hers. The appetite in the music was hers. Chaka Khan matters because she did not put sensuality on like costume jewelry. It moved in her voice as naturally as breath. That gave her a power many singers could not imitate because hers was not an act. It was transmission. Millie Jackson. Millie Jackson did not sing to be liked. She sang to say what polite women were supposed to swallow. Born on July 15, 1944 in Thompson, Georgia, she built a career out of turning female anger, lust, boredom, revenge, and bedroom truth into something loud enough to survive the room. Her records could feel like an argument, a confession, a dirty joke, and a warning all at once. That was the point. Millie did not perfume desire, she let it sweat. What made her so explosive was not simply sexual language. It was the fact that she sounded like she meant every bit of it. Men had long been allowed to brag, threaten, boast, and narrate desire without losing legitimacy. Millie Jackson took that same permission into a female mouth and made the culture flinch. She was not asking whether a woman was allowed to want. She was speaking as someone who already wanted, already knew, and did not care whether the room approved. That confidence gave her music its teeth. Do you think Millie Jackson scared people because she spoke from the body without softening the truth first? She remains unforgettable because she made female appetite sound unsanitized. Funny, vulgar, wounded, commanding, and brutally observant, she opened a lane that many singers benefited from later without having to pay the same cost. Millie Jackson matters because she refused to act like dignity and desire were enemies. She could be crude and still be right. She could be outrageous and still be exact. That combination is why people still remember her voice as something more than music. It was confrontation with rhythm. Patti LaBelle. Patti LaBelle looked like ceremony, but she sang like combustion. Born on May 24, 1944 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, she became one of the great American vocalists through gospel intensity, theatrical phrasing, and sheer emotional excess. Patti never gave the impression of being emotionally careful. Even when she stood in elegance, the sound coming out of her suggested pressure, heat, and surrender. That is what made her so captivating. She was never merely composed, she was charged. Her sensual presence worked through scale. Patti did not need explicitness. She had magnitude. When a woman fills a song that completely, people begin to project force onto every other part of her. The image that forms around Patti is one of a woman who feels too much to stay in the neat boxes people prefer. She carries maternal grandeur and carnal electricity at the same time, and that combination makes her harder to classify. A woman like that is often admired from a distance and feared up close. Do you think Patti LaBelle's elegance made people underestimate how intense she really was underneath? What keeps Patti unforgettable is that her emotional life always seemed to spill into performance rather than sit politely behind it. She did not sing about love as if it were abstract. She sang like it could overwhelm the body. That is why her recordings still feel huge. Patti LaBelle remains essential because she made female passion sound operatic without losing its rawness. She was not simply beautiful, she was overwhelming in full color. Etta James. Etta James sounded like a woman with smoke in her lungs and memory in her bones. Born on January 25, 1938 in Los Angeles, California, she brought a voice to music that never felt cleaned up for public comfort. It cracked, bit-side, dragged, and lunged. That roughness is why she remains unforgettable. Etta did not make pain elegant. She made it audible. And because love in her singing always came mixed with damage, her sensuality never felt decorative. It felt like survival without anesthesia. That is what makes her fit a title like this. Etta did not sound like a woman flirting from a safe place. She sounded like someone who had already paid for wanting too much and kept wanting anyway. There is a dangerous charge in that. Society is more comfortable with desire when it comes neatly packaged. Etta James made it sound feral, bruised, and immediate. She did not hide the idea that sex, loneliness, heartbreak, and the need to be held often live in the same room. That honesty is powerful, but it also makes people uneasy. Do you think Etta James moved people so deeply because her voice never separated desire from pain? She remains immortal because her performances contain no emotional cosmetics. What you hear is hunger with scar tissue on it. Etta James mattered because she turned the aftershock of living hard into song and refused to make it pretty for anyone. Her gift was not purity, it was truth at full volume. That is why she still sounds dangerous. Laverne Baker. Laverne Baker had elegance, but she also had bite. Born on November 11, 1929 in Chicago, Illinois, she rose as one of the great rhythm and blues voices with a sound full of wit, attack, and grown woman knowledge. She was not a timid singer and never sounded as if she needed permission to occupy the room. Even when a lyric stayed playful, there was something sharper beneath it. That edge matters. It is what made her seem less like a fantasy and more like a woman who knew the game before it even started. Her sexual energy was strong because it was self-possessed. She did not need to strip her image down to project heat. It lived in the smirk, the timing, the confidence, and the quiet suggestion that she understood exactly what effect she had. That can be harder for people to handle than open display. A woman who appears fully aware of her own pull is often treated as threatening. Laverne carried that quality naturally. She was glamorous but never soft in the way culture often demanded from black women. Do you think Laverne Baker's restraint made her even more seductive than someone who showed everything? She remains memorable because she proved desire can speak through control. It does not always need noise. Sometimes it arrives through certainty. Laverne Baker mattered because she brought mature female confidence into music without asking to be made smaller. That gives her a distinct place among these women. She did not burn like a spectacle. She burned like a slow fuse. Betty Davis. Betty Davis did not flirt with scandal. She walked straight through it. Born on July 26, 1945 in Durham, North Carolina, she entered music with a voice wardrobe, stage presence, and writing style that made even the 1970s seem conservative by comparison. Betty did not package sex as sweetness. She turned it into confrontation. Her songs sounded like women speaking from inside their own bodies rather than being described from the outside. That distinction made her radical. She was not waiting to be chosen. She was announcing terms. Her whole image challenged what female funk was allowed to be. She did not behave like a fantasy designed for male comfort. She behaved like a person with appetite command and no patience for shame. That scared the industry. Once a woman moves from being the object in the frame to the author of the frame, the entire balance changes. Betty Davis did that in clothes, in lyrics, in posture, and in tone. She made self-ownership look defiant rather than pleasing. Do you think Betty Davis was too bold for the era, or is the world still catching up with her now? She remains unforgettable because she refused to become digestible. She did not sand down her edges. She did not sweeten the message. Betty Davis mattered because she made erotic expressions sound authored deliberate and completely under female control. Even now, that still feels ahead of its time. She was not trying to be liked. She was trying to be unmistakable, and she succeeded. Natalie Cole. Natalie Cole lived under the shadow of polish, and that shadow could be deceptive. Born on February 6, 1950 in Los Angeles, California, she inherited one of the most elegant names in music, which meant that from the start, she was associated with class, refinement, and expectation. But a polished image can become its own prison. Natalie's voice, though sophisticated, always had emotional weather in it. She sounded like a woman who knew pleasure loss, recklessness, and loneliness even when she appeared perfectly put together. That is where her tension sits. The image around Natalie often suggested grace without mess, but her life and energy clearly held far more appetite than the public image allowed. She moved through romance, secrecy, impulse, and damage with the same human contradiction that follows many stars expected to look immaculate at all times. That contradiction is part of why she fits this title. Natalie did not embody vulgarity. She embodied the unsettling truth that elegance does not cancel desire. It often just teaches it better posture. Do you think Natalie Cole's sophistication made people miss how restless she really was inside? She remains memorable because she made yearning sound expensive rather than chaotic. That is a rare skill. She could hold dignity and ruin close enough for both to be heard. Natalie Cole mattered because she represented the woman who looks composed in public while carrying storms in private. That split is deeply recognizable, and it gave her voice a richness beyond pedigree or beauty alone. Jean Knight. Jean Knight made confidence sound like a weapon. Born on January 26, 1943 in New Orleans, Louisiana, she became unforgettable through Mr. Big Stuff, a song that turns female refusal into style. She did not sing as though she needed to flatter the listener. She sounded amused, alert, and unimpressed. That matters because self-possession in women is often sexualized immediately, especially when it is paired with humor and command. Jean Knight did not chase attention. She made attention come to her. Her appeal in this context comes from control. She carried the energy of someone who understood exactly what she did to a room and had no interest in pretending otherwise. That is a deeply unsettling quality in a woman for cultures that prefer female modesty over female certainty. Jean's songs and public attitude suggested somebody who could want, choose, dismiss, and enjoy without asking permission first. That does not just read as sexy, it reads as power, and power in women is often mislabeled as excess. Do you think Jean Knight's coolness made her more provocative than women who acted overtly sexual? She remains significant because she proved that desire does not have to beg. It can assess, it can reject, it can laugh. Jean Knight brought that posture into music with rare clarity. She was not loud for the sake of noise. She was exact. That precision is why she still lingers. She made a woman's certainty sound thrilling. Sylvia Robinson. Sylvia Robinson did something rare. She made sensuality commercially audible and then went on to reshape music history from the business side. Born on March 6, 1935 in New York City, she first recorded as a singer whose style leaned into breath intimacy and physical suggestion. Later, she became widely known as the co-founder of Sugar Hill Records, which helped push rap into the mainstream. Most people remember one side or the other, but the combination is what makes her fascinating. Sylvia understood pleasure as sound and power as structure. That is why her place in this list matters. Pillow Talk did not just sound intimate. It reoriented what female closeness could sound like on record. The track moved with an ease that suggested a woman fully aware of her own body and completely willing to let that knowledge shape the art. Then, years later, she built business infrastructure in one of music's most male-dominated spaces. That is not coincidence. It is continuity. Sylvia did not stop being a woman with appetite once she became an executive. She became a woman who could translate instinct into industry. Do you think Sylvia Robinson's sensual side is overlooked because her role in hip-hop became so historically huge? She remains unforgettable because she joined two kinds of authorship that are rarely allowed to meet in women: erotic authorship and financial authorship. She wrote feeling into sound and then wrote strategy into culture. Sylvia Robinson mattered because she did not choose between being desirous and being powerful. She insisted on both. Barbara Mason. Barbara Mason knew how to make a whisper feel physical. Born on August 9, 1947 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, she became known for songs that moved gently but never innocently. Her voice did not strike like a weapon. It lingered like breath close to the skin. That is why her work matters in a list like this. Barbara made sensuality feel interior. She did not project conquest. She projected waiting, yearning ache and the quiet insistence that women also possess deep physical need. This kind of singing is often underestimated because it is not aggressive, but softness can be extremely direct when it knows what it wants. Barbara's artistry lived in that territory. She made intimacy feel like an atmosphere rather than an act. Her records suggest dim rooms, unresolved nights, and emotions that sit near the body without becoming crude. That is harder than shock. It requires precision. Barbara Mason did not shout to be heard. She moved closer until you had to listen. Do you think Barbara Mason's softness made her message about female desire even more powerful? She remains important because she proved a woman does not need spectacle to communicate need. She can murmur it. She can let it tremble through a line. She can leave it suspended in a phrase that feels unfinished on purpose. Barbara Mason matters because she gave longing a feminine intelligence. Her songs do not simply seduce. They reveal how much can live inside restraint. Marlena Shaw. Marlena Shaw did not need volume to command a room. Born on September 22, 1939 in New Rochelle, New York, she became known for jazz and soul performances that felt poised, intelligent, and emotionally layered. Her voice did not rush toward the listener. It circled, suggested, and waited. That quality is crucial here, because Marlena's sensuality was built not on exposure, but on withheld knowledge. She sang like someone who understood exactly what she was not saying, and that made every line more charged. Unlike some of the women on this list, Marlena did not build public mythology through overt erotic shock. She built it through tension. Her elegance could easily be mistaken for distance, but that would miss the point. Some women do not need to announce hunger, they let it collect in the air around them. Marlena's recordings often feel like that. The feeling is there, but it arrives through glance, tone, pause, and atmosphere. That kind of control can be more intoxicating than confession because it lets the listener do part of the work. Do you think Marlena Shaw felt more seductive because she kept so much hidden? She remains unforgettable because she showed that desire can live inside reserve without becoming cold. She did not hand herself over completely, and that partial distance gave her enormous allure. Marlena Shaw matters because she proved mystery is not the opposite of passion. Sometimes it is the form passion takes when it has learned to protect itself. These women were called too bold, too hungry, too difficult, too dangerous. But maybe the real question is this: were they truly excessive, or was the world simply uncomfortable with women who refused to hide desire behind politeness? If men had lived, loved, and sung with the same intensity, would history have judged them the same way? Which singer do you think was most misunderstood, and who do you believe paid the highest price for living too honestly? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you want more powerful stories like this, follow and subscribe to Cine Legacy Vault Hollywood.